Hi, in this week's episode, we are going to be talking about going on holiday or traveling and talking about how we can keep ourselves as healthy as possible. And that involves both trying to keep injury free, because apparently about 4.4 million people can sustain injuries whilst going on holiday in just the last 3 years. So
Wow.
we want to see if we can tackle that situation. And it's something I hear about a lot in clinic, but also obviously going on holiday, we want to take tasty food with us as well and some nice
Definitely.
snacks. So we can talk about lovely things that we can do to make that as easy as possible and to avoid the soggy sandwiches. So, so Henry, when you go on holiday or you go away, what do you tend to pack up for yourself in terms of food?
Well, if I think back to my last summer holiday, so we went camping in France for a couple of weeks, which was very nice, and we drove there across on the ferry and then all the way down. So it was, I think, it was almost like an 18-hour drive that we did in shifts, and I think for me, what 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 it's all about is having a really good snack bag. So there's a few things. One is that if you're in a car for a long time, um, uh, it puts you at the mercy of motorway service stations, which tend to not have the best array of food, and also the prices tend to be on the higher side, so you can get totally stung, particularly if you're traveling with kids. So you can
Yes.
almost you can probably throw away half your holiday budget just on crap from from the service station. So for me, it's about doing a bit of shopping beforehand and getting a really epic snack bag that's going to sustain you through. And so things that we would typically put in there. So just a cool bag, couple of freezer packs, or you can even if you don't want to carry too much, you could freeze some water bottles, and then towards the end of the journey they'll have defrosted, and then you can drink them. So you can be a bit resourceful there. But things like hummus is always a great one. And then some carrot sticks and some pepper sticks, little Tupperware tub. And you want to eat that probably fairly at the beginning of the journey because it's not going to last too long. But, it's kind of a tasty little snack that's going to keep you going. You want to avoid things like, I don't know, just bags of crisps and Haribo and all the usual kind of things that you would see as kind of like easy grab bags because they're going to be full of V numbers. They're not going to make you feel great, particularly if you're in a car. I can just imagine the children fueled on Doritos and Haribo for 18 hours. There's going to be, it's going to test everyone's patience and as their energy levels absolutely skyrocket and plummet. So I think it's just about trying to fill it with some tasty stuff like bags of nuts are really good, or there's like mixed nuts and seeds, quite easy, particularly if they're not too. Don't go for the ones that are really over seasoned because you're gonna eat too many of them if they're a bit too moreish. So actually, just go for like a plain roasted one or just a salted one. And it's a struggle to eat half a kilo of dry nuts, but if they're coated in some delicious, I don't know, piri piri, whatever, full of E numbers, you're gonna smash your way through it and then probably not feel so great. So yeah, I think a good epic snack bag. Actually, last year, very sadly, we left. Our ferry was at like I think maybe 6 o'clock in the morning, so we left at like 3 o'clock in the morning, which so it's kind of didn't
Early.
really sleep very well the night before. We're kind of up and off we go, and we'd done about 15 miles, and we had plenty of time to get to the ferry, and then we remembered the snack bag was in the fridge. And so we had the
No.
decision. We were like, "Do we turn around?" And I was like, "There's about £60 worth of premium snacks that are definitely not going to last the holiday." So we turned around, which then meant we had to drive slightly faster than we'd like at 3 in the morning, which actually was quite exciting. So I always like to live slightly on the edge, but we did turn around for the snacks.
And it is worth putting that effort in, isn't it, before you go? It's a shame that you did forget them initially, but yeah, always worth the effort. And something I remember always doing, and actually I think my dad taught me this trick, was to peel an orange and put it into a bag so it's already unpeeled, like peeled,
Yeah, yeah,
so
that's a
that you
good
could
that's a
just
good
kind
one.
of snack away at it. So you just kind of have it on the front seat and you don't have to obviously take your eyes off the road and you've just got grapes
Yes,
and fruit and things
yes,
there just ready to go if you need to. Because like
yes.
you say, kids, if they're going to eat crisps or other things that are not such good choices for them, or especially sweets, within 20 minutes that's going to hit the bloodstream and you're going to have a nightmare of a car journey, aren't you?
Totally. And things like, like doing a few yogurt pots. So actually, we quite often just buy some, full fat Greek yogurt, Valley organic, totally fine. And then just pre-mix it with some, yeah, like some chopped up fruit, a bit of seeds. You could maybe put a bit of maple or honey if the kids want it a bit sweeter, but you don't have to. And then just a few, a couple of spoons. And actually, the kids are hungry, kind of 7 in the morning, they're like, "Oh, can we have some breakfast?" Rather than stopping off and getting a muffin and actually, a nice bit of yogurt. Great. I probably wouldn't do like cereal and milk because it's almost certainly going to spill everywhere. But actually, thick good Greek yogurt is a fairly easy thing to eat whilst driving along.
Yeah, and you can kind of prepare those in advance as well, can't you? And
Totally.
do you ever bake anything before you would set off? Would you like, because I sometimes like make little scones and things and chuck loads of grated vegetables into those and then I freeze them and then I defrost them so that after about an hour they're ready to eat. And you don't really need any butter. They're quite sort of like tasty on their own. But do
Yeah,
do you bake anything special like that, Henry?
it's an interesting one because I obviously help run a bakery. There's always a kind of plethora of baked goods on tap. So I haven't done those little like savory scones. We've definitely done like kind of homemade granola bars or something a bit more so with less sugar, a bit more peanut, maybe dips, a little bit of chocolate, just if we're feeling a bit naughty.
Yeah.
But those little muffiny things, they sound great. A really good idea.
Well, they freeze really well.
Mm.
The base of those is basically Greek yogurt as well. So it's just like flour, Greek yogurt, bit of cheese, baking
Yeah,
powder,
perfect.
and you kind of throw it in, and I just kind of do it like that, mix them up,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I grate courgette and carrot into them, and then
yeah.
I
Lovely. Sound
freeze them. And
delicious.
it's kind of like a
Almost like
healthy way to hide the veg.
yeah, yeah, totally. Or like I've definitely done like little falafels. They're quite fun because you can kind of
Mhm.
and then again quite good. Kind of dipped into a bit of hummus. Kind of
Yeah,
if a carrot stick can get a bit boring. Nice to have
yeah, or
someone with a
different
bit more
vegetables, can't
flavor.
you? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
that's it. Yeah, with your hummus, you could have, as long as it's not too hot, I guess. Because
No,
if you're in a hot car, that like if you're traveling,
yes,
depending on what time of day, like I sometimes chop up like peppers and other, even anything sliced that you just think that will dip quite well. And it's not
yes,
always like you say, carrots can get a bit like, oh,
yes,
cucumber works quite
yes,
well, doesn't it, as well? So
yes. Yeah,
there's
I
some
think
good tasty things there.
I think it's just knowing that at some point on your journey you're gonna get hungry, and even if you're going on a plane, actually, you like I think the restrictions have changed a little bit that you can take a little bit of food on, and because often plane food is either well unless you're flying first class to Dubai or whatever,
Yeah,
and
you
you've
don't
got
need to worry at all.
fillets there, yeah, you don't have to worry. But if you're on Ryanair or EasyJet, the in-flight food that you've got to buy is tends to be pretty bang average, doesn't it? And definitely
Yeah,
overpriced. And um
yeah.
and particularly if you're with kids, it's a handy thing to have a few snacks kind of squirreled away and stuff that does last. So like those little muffiny things or little like little granola bars or something that is going to sustain them through. Because sometimes the flight's only a couple of hours, so you don't need like a full on meal, but just something to keep them going.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So before you jet off, I'm quite interested to know because this is something that I bore patients with in clinic. But
Okay,
um, before you set off, you've thought about your snacks, you've probably thought about your car in the sense of you've checked the oil, you've checked the water level, you've checked your petrol level, everything else. Do you
you've got
ever
very high
think
expectations of me, but yeah, they got yeah. Let's
maybe this
assume
is
I've
going to
done
go
that.
to
Yeah, yeah,
health?
yeah.
But do you ever think about how your car's set up, especially if like do you have like a little do you decide who's going to drive, like whether it's you or your wife? Do you kind of say, "Oh, I'm going to drive this bit of the journey," and then you take over? And
We're a very modern couple, and my wife loves driving. She's probably a better driver than me, so we would definitely just tag team it. So like last year when we drove down to France, we drove through the night because we thought it was going to be less disruptive for the kids and also waste less of the holiday. So we did kind of 3 hours on, 3 hours off, where one would sleep and the other would drive, and then we just prod the other one like, I'm getting sleepy now. Can we you know swap over? I mean, if you're in a car for 15 hours, you get a bit stiff, don't you? So we did, when we kind of pulled over for our little interchange, we'd have like a little 10-minute break and we were definitely doing a few child poses on the tarmac just to like stretch yourself out. Because I think you just kind of you get a bit stiff, don't you?
yeah, absolutely.
I, 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 I suffer from a weak lower back, so I definitely get if I'm in a kind of like slump position all day, I do really feel it, and so I know now to when I do get out to do some stretches and just try and. But is that what can you do like when you're in a car? Because obviously you can't change your seat that much. Is there things that you can do to try and improve
Yeah,
posture?
well, you can actually look at your car setup, especially if you're changing from one driver to the other. And some of the modern cars, I don't have one of these cars, but you can have different settings. So you can press like one for the male and two for the female, or whoever your partner is. And that's great because it will go zzz, all back into the right settings that you last had
Yes.
it in. I'm not that lucky to have a car like that. So, and it's actually better to just sit in the car and you're looking for an angle in your elbow. So when you're sitting in the car, if you're holding onto your steering wheel, you're looking to see if you have about you could call it like a 120-degree range between the two parts of your arm. So you're looking for that
Yes.
angle. If you're too bent up or too extended, you're going to affect how your lower back's actually positioned as well. So most of the time, people are either too close to their steering wheel or far too far away, and then
Okay.
that causes them to either round their shoulders or poke their head
Yes.
forward. And then
Okay.
you get very tense across the back of the neck. And as soon as you
Yes.
start fatiguing across the back of the neck, it will then start moving down to your upper back and into your lower back. And if you're sitting and your hips are quite low, or you're sinking into the bottom, like into the seat itself, you'll find that your knees will be much higher than your hips, and that will push you back into the wrong position, and you'll feel that across your lower back, and that will feel very achy. So you want to try and sort of pump your chair up so that your hips come up a little bit higher, and so it's not such an acute angle from where your hips and your knees are. So whether you can try and get your hip and your knee at the same level, or very slightly higher, or not much lower, is when people have their hips right down here and their knees are up here, that it puts the pressure all through the lower back. And that's
So
what we
how
want to avoid.
So how do I balance that with my boy racer persona, where I want to be, slouching back as as far as possible? Is that not an ideal place to be
No,
sitting? I
absolutely.
need to be
Yeah. So, yeah. So
more like the
people say
more like
like they, that's it, like
okay,
a
I
bus
get it.
driver, Henry. You need to
Like
become
a
more
bus
like a
driver.
bus
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
driver.
yeah. More
And
like a bus
so, yeah,
driver.
no, for
Okay.
sure. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you don't want to be too close. And that's where the angle with the elbow works
Yeah, that's
best
that's
first.
interesting. That's good. Next
Yeah.
time I get my car, I'm gonna try that because that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you should adjust everything else
Yes,
around that. So
yes.
then you
So you
should
can
then
use that
think,
as a bit of a measure, and then you adjust around, so then you find that perfect position. Interesting.
yeah,
That's a good
yeah.
hack. I like that. I like that.
Yeah, it's a good little hack. So you
Yes.
kind of do that. You can pump up your seat as well. So
Yes.
I always say to patients or whoever I'm looking at their car, I'll say, like, just try and get the seat up as high as you possibly can. Like, apart from if your head's like touching the roof, that's a little bit too high. But yeah, you want to go with that elbow position and the hip and knee angle first, and then you should be sort of feeling when you depress through your pedals, like how much of an overstretch is that? Because if you're having to push and your body's having to rotate to give
Yes.
you that pressure, then you're going to get a right-sided lower back problem because
Yes.
you're pushing too far. If you can depress the pedal quite nicely and you're not having to do any shift through the rest of the body, then that's going to be much more comfortable as you drive. And then you should think about all your interior mirror. So
Yeah.
I say to people, if you're going to do a long journey, you should tilt it ever so slightly a little bit higher, where you have to sit up to look into it, because that will maintain a really good posture. Most of the
Gotcha.
time, you
Nice.
start off with good intentions, and we all do this,
Yes.
don't we? We go
Yeah. Just
down, 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 down,
slouched
and then
out.
you're
Yeah. Yeah.
probably like
Yeah.
this, Henry, in your car.
Yeah. 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 Well, it's when you're on those long French roads that just straight and no one on it and hardly any traffic, and you're just cruising,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
not
But
good
you
for your
can,
back.
no, not good for your back, because then if you do have that angled mirror, it will allow you to sit up. You'll go, oh, and you can judge that based on how much you're slumping as well. So if you can't see in that mirror from when you set it initially before you set off, you'll be like, oh, I really must be slumping if I'm having to really sit up to have a look. And that's a little bit of a reminder that maybe you need a break, maybe you need to stop. And people, we all use the back of the seat to sit against, but occasionally just sit yourself away from the back of the seat so you engage your tummy muscles,
Yes.
because that way you'll also work on your six pack there, Henry, as well
No,
at the same
perfect. Yeah,
time as
yeah, yeah,
driving.
yeah. Well, that's always high on my mind before a summer holiday. So you mentioned right at the beginning about the amount of people who get injured on holiday. Does a lot of that happen on the journey, or is it kind of because I always assume that when you're on holiday you can't get injured. That's the rule that I've always taken when you're hiring a moped and you know screaming around tight roads with flip flops and no protection apart from like a 20-year-old helmet they've passed over. I just kind of assume that I'm safe when I'm on holiday, but possibly that's deluded.
Yeah, well, we see all sorts. So it can even start from packing. So people
Mhm.
will start packing up, they'll overload their cases, they'll overreach for their suitcases down from, the dusty suitcase down from the loft.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They've gone up the ladders. Sometimes they fall off the ladders. Sometimes they have overloaded the suitcase and they pick up the suitcase wrong and the back goes, or the car journey. So as we've discussed, if you don't set up your car correctly, when you actually get to the journey, and a lot of people do this, and they go, the roads were fine. I just wanted to crack on. I sat for 3 hours. I got to destination. I got out of the car. My back went, and I had this shooting pain down my leg.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they're classically describing a sciatic symptom.
Okay.
And that's because, we're putting too much pressure on the body. Not every time is it sciatica, but people, if they're vulnerable to it or they're carrying risk factors, that means they're predisposed to sciatica. It could be that the car journey, because when we sit in a car, we're actually stretching our sciatic nerve in that position. It puts it on a
Okay.
strain. So that's the one position where we know that we're actually really pushing and putting pressure through the sciatic nerve, which is why it's even more important that we sit properly when we are in the car in that position, because otherwise
Where is
the,
this?
the
Where is the
longevity.
sciatic nerve? Where is
Yeah,
the
so
sciatic
so
nerve?
basically we have all our kind of vertebral body, and then in between we have the discs. And where the discs and the vertebral body sit, you've got exiting nerve roots. And
Okay.
each bony point is actually numbered or called something. So it's like thoracic spine or T1 to T12, and then it goes down into the lumbar spine. So we have L1 to L5 and S1. And all of these nerve roots supply different parts of our body. And everything in the lumbar spine is going to refer or radiate down into our legs. If you the discs between the bones, we know that if we sit and put too much pressure on those, what happens is as we're a bit vulnerable between the age of 35 and 55 with our discs. And
Okay.
if we don't look after our body, we don't drink enough, we don't exercise enough, we don't maintain good flexibility, we don't have good strength in our abdominal muscles and our lower back muscles, and even our legs and our balance and everything else that can kind of contribute. Or if we sit wrong and we lift incorrectly frequently and a lot over time, all this plays a part onto how our discs are then becoming quite vulnerable. And as we age, unfortunately, the discs will, they can have little tiny cracks in them, and then the middle part of the disc will start to seep out through into those cracks, and you
Okay.
get like a collection. Imagine it like a little bit of like red jam just collecting at the side, Henry, of your disc. And that collection kind of presses on what we call the nerve roots that are also coming out of the spine. So it's
So
basically
that
occupying the space, and it's that
yes,
touching of any disc
that
material
hurts.
on the nerve root which will radiate down. So not everybody has the actual accumulation. Sometimes you can just have a tight nerve, and the nerve should be like a nice gliding sliding structure, but sometimes that gets a bit stuck or sticky, or it just kind of doesn't glide as properly as it should do. So there's all kinds of reasons why you might end up getting some referred pain into your leg. It doesn't always have to be true sciatica. And most
Yes.
people will come in and go, oh, I've got sciatica. But to be sciatica, it does actually have to radiate into the leg and down into the foot. And that can either be on one side or both sides. And people panic when that happens because it's agony. People come into a clinic and they're in a lot of pain with this. And it sometimes can be triggered by something like having gone on a car journey. And that won't be the only cause. Something would have built up to this over
Yes.
time. It's the
So
last
so
thing
this
that
this hap this
happened.
this happened to me. So when I office based, and then I did some aggressive wood chopping one weekend with an axe. Had a lot of fun, but I had a sore back, and then a few days later we drove down to Cornwall. It was like a 3 hour drive, and I think there's quite a lot of traffic, so probably took maybe 5 hours, and then operating a heavy laden supermarket trolley with because we were shopping for like 16 people, so I had like absolutely stacked to the rafters, and I just felt my back go, and it was awful. I ended up coming home on the train because I couldn't. I was like, I can't sit down, so I caught a train home and stood up, and that's when I got into Pilates and stuff. Because and the way the physio described at the time, he said it was a bit like a bit of jam and a donut has been squeezed, and a bit of jam's come out the side, and it's like, and he probably mentioned words like sciatic, but I forgot.
Yeah.
But all I remember was it really bloody hurt.
Yeah, it
And
does.
actually, that okay, the root cause maybe wasn't the journey, but it definitely that journey down to Cornwall. And I remember my brother saying before, like, "Oh, you should be careful on holiday. Don't push yourself too hard." Because I was catering and like he knew that I'd be, going fairly full on. He was like, "If your back's bad, you should, don't push yourself." And then I pushed it too hard, and then it just went, and it felt like a knife was being stabbed into my lower back and just like shooting pain. Yeah, horrible.
Yeah, it does. It's horrible. If you cough or sneeze, it's those
Yes.
intra-abdominal pressures that cause, because anything that's intra-abdominal pressure will cause an extra intense pain through the disc and onto the sciatic nerve or onto any nerve root. Same with when people go to the loo.
Yes.
And even just getting up from the toilet, if they've opened up the bowels, for instance,
Mm.
that will cause enough intra-abdominal pressure, and any pressure change will trigger it. And people stand up from getting up from the toilet, and they can feel that pain going down the leg. So when this happened to you, Henry,
Yeah.
what did you do? Because then I can talk you through what you could have perhaps done.
Well, I tried to do some stretches. So my brother, I've got a lot of brothers, but one of my brothers is a chiropractor, so that's quite it was a reassuring thing to have in the house. And
Yeah.
but he was arriving later, so I think we got there at maybe 2, and he was arriving at 10 o'clock. And so there was a little bit of kind of like waiting, and I think I probably just decided to get on the beers and a kind of like, well, that'll
Try
just
and numb the
numb the
pain.
pain, numb the pain, and I wasn't sitting down. And then my little brother said, "Oh, we should do some stretches." And so we were doing some stretches, and I think maybe I was going too much. And then I sat down into a sofa, and the sofa had very little support, and my bottom then sunk really low into this like squishy sofa, and I literally yowled in pain. It made me cry, and there's all my family around, so it's like,
Yeah, yeah.
so they were kind of like concerned, but also, they were on holiday, so kind of like, oh, or maybe he really is in pain. And so the next day, my dad took me to Penzance Hospital, and a very nice doctor made me. I had to clench on her finger, which you probably know what that means, and then she stuck some cocodamine at me, which made everything much better.
Yes,
But
it
then,
does.
so I think my chiropractor brother was saying like the drugs will just make you feel a bit better. They're not going to solve the problem. You need to come and do some physio and do some stretches and Pilates and stuff. And so, and I think the lesson for me was that actually up until that point, I thought I was invincible. So I could just, from no warm up, do 2 hours of chopping with an axe, load of wood and be like, whoa. But actually, and I now, like, even just sitting here now, like I can feel it's not painful, but like, I know that if I just sit in one position the whole time, it gets sore and weak. So I do stretches. I, try and engage my core. And so I guess it's that thing of when, if you've got a weakness, or that you're prone to, that travel is not good for you, well, you don't want to start your holiday with a kind of, oh, then I spent the next 2 days in pain because the journey to get on holiday. Well, if you've only got a week holiday, well, that's pretty naff, isn't it? So the things like adjusting your seat so that you're giving yourself, is there anything else that you can do to like, like try and get through that journey without, kind of completely, ruining a few days?
Yeah, exactly. So, like say, sitting away from the chair can activate your core muscles to help protect your back. And some people have heated seats, so they put the heated seats on because heat can help relax any muscle tension or spasm, because that
Okay.
can be quite compensatory sometimes when if you have got a weakness in your lower back, you want to keep those muscles nice and relaxed.
Yes.
And if you don't have heated seats, I say to patients, if you know you're a back pain sufferer, just put in your bag one of those like weighted bags or a hot water bottle.
Yes.
Take it with you on holiday, because there's nothing worse if someone has like sat or their back goes on holiday, that's a thing to reach for, because that can also help alongside, painkillers if you need them.
Yeah.
But the other thing you can do is prevention. If you don't, have acute episodes of back pain, and you just ache from time to time, and you think, and these can be warnings. So people who might be listening, who think, well, I get a little bit of back pain, but I don't have what Henry's just described.
Yeah.
Actually, they could be working towards that if they don't act, because if they're not working on, back mobility, working on the strength, then they could leave themselves vulnerable. So when you get on holiday, I say to patients, if you've been sitting in a flex posture, because that's what we do when we sit in the car, you try and lay prone, so that's like laying on your tummy, lay over a couple of cushions or pillows, and lay flat, so you're sort of face down, almost like you're doing a bit of a skydive over a couple of pillows,
Yeah.
and just rest your back muscles as soon as you get to destination, and place heat on your back, so like a hot water bottle, and then maybe just trying to do a little bit of a stretch onto your elbow so that your lower back relaxes and you introduce a little bit of extension through the back, if you can tolerate that. And that's a nice thing to do, just to reverse the position that you've been in. And then doing other little exercises if you can on holiday. So whether people like to go on an exercise bike, if you've got access to a gym in a hotel, or biking and cycling is always a really good exercise to try and do, to try and like loosen up and free up the back.
Gotcha.
And one of my patients said to me once, well, I don't have a bike. I don't, I'm not going to a gym based hotel. And what can I do? I've got tiny little space where I'm going. There's not enough room to do anything. And I said, well, could you stand on a single leg? So stand on one leg, lift up the other,
Yeah.
and cycle that stable, like
Okay,
the leg.
just for that kind of motion.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
basically just get the movement and then swap over. And I said, that's actually really good because you're working on balance as well. So you're doing two things at once. You kind of, and she was going quite fast. She could do it. And she loved it so much that she came back from holiday and said, I still do that exercise now at home. I was like,
Brilliant.
and so you can do, yeah, the more you can do movement, our backs and our bodies like movement.
Mm.
And the thing too, a lot of people worry when this happens, and all healthcare professionals will tell you that we get a little bit concerned about cauda equina, which is where the disc or the disc material has actually pressed so badly on the nerve root, it's causing an issue into the bladder, and it's causing this kind of cauda equina. So it's this tail kind of nerve roots that are going through into the lower back that are affected, and that could mean that you could end up with kind of incontinence issues if the disc material is not removed in time. So it's a big concern that we have in healthcare. But there's things that you can do to just check to
Is
see
that
if
why
you've
the
got that.
is that why the doctor made me clench on her?
Absolutely. So they will
Yes.
do
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
checks around the bottom.
Yeah, yeah,
So
because
what you're
I was
looking,
like, is this necessary? She was like, yes,
yeah,
yes, yes,
absolutely.
and she did say, she was like, it's probably fine, but this is a way that we check to see whether you've got control of the muscles in
Absolutely.
your butt.
Because if you've got control of the muscles, then there's not
Yes,
such a big concern.
yeah,
If you didn't
totally,
have the control, they would be thinking, okay,
yeah,
we
yeah,
might need to go
totally,
and even operate or do something at
yeah,
that
yeah,
moment. So they're doing it to try and reduce your chances of ever becoming incontinent for any reason. And that could be front and bottom end. So it
yes,
can
yeah.
happen.
I was since told by some of my friends that as you get older, every time you go to the doctors or hospitals, they tend to stick your finger up your bottom and just get used
Yeah.
to it. I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, it was the first time for me.
But that they can tell so much from that, you
Yeah,
see, and
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
such
yeah, yeah.
it's a really useful test. And
True.
you can easily, it's a quick test, so you can easily reassure someone with as
Yeah,
well. So some
yeah, yeah.
physios are trained to do that as well
Yes,
as doctors, but doctors are superb at knowing
yes.
exactly what to do with that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But yeah,
It's just
you're
good.
always looking to see if it's affected your bladder and bowel in any way. So if you're, losing control, then you're really done something wrong, especially if you've got either bilateral numbness or pins and needles in your legs, or if it's going into one leg and you've got altered bladder and bowel sensation or symptoms. You go into the toilet, you just can't feel what you're doing.
Yes,
That's not right. But if
that's not
you're,
right. No.
sometimes people will cough or sneeze and their back will jar, and that's all the muscle spasm. Or they might say they've done a cough, and for whatever reason, they might find that their bladder's a little just a bit more sensitive. So they might say,
Yes,
oh, I just need to go more often. And that's because the nerve's irritated. Doesn't always mean that that's so much of a problem that needs to go to A&E. So
yes,
there are things that you can do to just kind of reassure yourself. But there's a quarter equina checklist that you can look up online if you're ever concerned, and patients can go through and think, do I have that? And if you're ever in doubt, you should go and get it checked.
yes,
So back pain is a classic injury that
yeah,
we see on holiday.
yeah.
Another one is actually plantar fasciitis,
I beg
because
your pardon.
people change their footwear. Have you ever had that, Henry?
I don't know what that is. What did you say? Plantar? It sounded Latin to me.
You're like, is that something I can add to food?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But that's where the bottom of your foot gets really tight.
Okay.
So a classic example is if someone's like lived in trainers and then they go into flip flops or change
Flip
footwear, or
flops.
they go and run on concrete or on sand or something where the bottom of the foot's going to tighten up, or they do a lot of walking and perhaps they never did any walking and they think,
Yes.
why is my foot hurting? Or ladies, if they wear a lot of high heels and they get very tight through their
Yes.
back of their calf muscles, and that can leave them a little bit prone to it as well. Yeah, you can have plantar fasciitis and things like that that people come back with shoulder problems because they've, lifted or carried bags and done a sport that they thought, well, why not give that a go while we're on holiday?
Yes.
So we
Yes.
can see multiple musculoskeletal injuries when they do go away.
So it's almost because I guess when you go on holiday, you're not thinking about getting injured. Well, I certainly don't think about getting injured. But I guess you can kind of is the idea, if you know you're going to go from trainers to flip flops, do you need to kind of like tr train yourself a few weeks before and just start wearing the flip flops around the house for a bit just to kind of
Yeah.
acclimatize, or is that too basic? I don't know.
You could no, absolutely. It doesn't need to be complicated at all, Henry. That's exactly it. Like you could wear your flip flops like say half an hour a day, and build
Yeah.
it up and just get used to it. If you're going to do long walks, you're always better with a trainer or a shoe that
Yes.
you can tie up
Yes.
quite nicely rather than the flip
Yeah.
flops,
Yeah.
but depending on obviously the weather and the temperature. But yeah,
Yes.
just kind of climatizing yourself to a new footwear. It's when people jump footwear that we sometimes see a big difference. And yeah, and if they've taken a sport up or something like that, skiing for example, they might go off and go skiing, and obviously those kind of sports are a little bit unpredictable
Yeah.
as to whether someone's going to have an injury. But
Sometimes
it's
that
just trying to
tree's
be
just annoying.
mindful. Yeah, it's just trying to be mindful of what you could do, and having that little hot water bottle packed is a
Yes.
is a good one. But the plane as well. So if people are going on the aeroplane, you try and see, don't you, the air hostesses going through with their kind of your sheet of safety instructions, and occasionally on there it will tell you to do, your heel raises where you kind of
Yes.
pump your ankles and
Was that because that I remember my parents talking about when I used to go on holiday with them. I think someone that they knew died of deep vein thrombosis, and whether
yeah,
it was someone it was just in the news, but I think it was like afterwards it happened in the Hotel Lille or something a few hours later. So I remember my parents kind of bought these socks that like were very tight, and then they'd be there kind of like pumping their legs. And you're like, what are
yeah,
you doing? And but now as a kind of adult, when I go on a plane, I'm like, oh, maybe I should be pumping those legs. Don't want to die when I get to the
no,
destination.
yeah,
I guess for me, I just try and like, if you're on a long flight, to get up and walk around a bit and just, even if it's go to the loo, even if you don't need the loo, just, I don't know. Is
yeah,
that kind of sensible? I mean, I do it probably more just because I get a bit bored and, I need to kind of stretch out a little bit. But
yeah. No, you should. The more you can, so doing the ankle pumps is fine in your chair,
yeah,
and you can do things like lift up one leg and pop it down, lift up the other leg and pop it
yeah,
down, squeeze your bottom. It's going
yeah,
to act as a pump as well. But if you
yeah,
can stand up, you're going to get even more benefit. And people feel
yes,
silly, don't they? They go, oh, I don't want to do
yes,
that, everyone's going to look at me. And I'm
yeah,
like, great, you could be an
yeah,
example of how to do
yeah,
exercise on
totally,
the plane.
yeah, yeah,
And I often stand up and I don't really care, and I sort of stand in the middle and I'm sort of stretching out because absolutely, you don't want to get dehydrated on an aeroplane because that's going to thicken your blood and that's going to make you more at risk if you're a bit vulnerable for these things to happen.
yes,
But also the movement and working through the calf muscle is a good way because it's our pump system to help blood flow back to the heart. So you want to keep those calf muscles nice and healthy. And we know actually that the stronger and the more calf muscle we have is actually a good representation of our health. And even by doing your calf pumping or even just a normal calf stretch, and then you could do a second one. So where you do a classic calf stretch where you pop one leg in front of the other and you hold the stretch at the back of your ankle. If you bend the knee as well, if you bend that back knee, you can get an extra stretch, which is your soleus muscle, and you can stretch that too. And that's another easy one that you can do. People don't really know you're doing it because you're
no,
standing
yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yes.
aisle. You could be pretending to lean on someone's chair, just having a chat, and actually you're stretching the back of your leg if you're a bit
And why
embarrassed.
why is that particularly important on a plane? Is it because of your blood thickening,
Yeah, so we just
or is
want
it
to
is it the
keep
sitting still, or is it
it's the
is it
sitting still, it's the
sitting
pressure, and
still?
you want to kind of, yeah, so you're using your calf muscle as well as your heart to help pump things around the body. So you want to kind of use
Okay.
it.
I never really thought about
And
you.
if you Yeah, and if you drink a lot, like if you're drinking alcohol and you're dehydrating yourself, you're going to have thicker blood, and that's not so
Yes.
good. If you know, obviously people go on holiday, they go, oh, they're on the plane, oh, have a drink. But if you have to have alcohol, have water with it, or if you can, try and delay when you're having your alcohol until you're off the plane,
Down
and
those
just try and keep your
dirty
sanity.
martinis. I think I once went to Asia with my brother, and I had 8, and I was quite sick. Anyway, that was
Oh dear.
wasn't my finest spot. Anyway, I didn't have the kids with me. Anyway, I got a bit overexcited.
We we see this. It's interesting. It's reminding me of a case I'll never forget. Somebody went on holiday to go and run like an ultra marathon or a marathon, and they said, oh, you know, I was just so excited to be on holiday, and they'd obviously drunk a little bit of alcohol or maybe a lot just before, and you can really dehydrate your body in multiple ways, but people don't think about the effect on the tendons. So
Okay.
if you're running, that's not great. So if you're drinking a lot, then you want to compete. Guys classically can sometimes do this as well as ladies, but normally I have seen it more in my male patients, and they think, oh, it's okay because it was the day before or the 2 days before, but actually our tendon cells are turning over and they can be a bit sluggish as we get older. So if you're affecting the kind of quality of how your tendon cells are regenerating and replacing themselves, you can leave yourself prone to injuries and tendinopathies and things like that. So if you're thinking of going on holiday and running, like you need to watch, like, actually, maybe I shouldn't drink so much because you're more at risk of rupturing
Yes.
something as well if that's the case. So you have to, yeah, you have to kind of weigh up what you're doing if you can, and just trying to make sort of sensible decisions with that, or at least do the marathon, then have your drink afterwards.
Then have your drink after. Yeah.
Once
Do
you
on the return flight.
That's it. Once you've had all your
Yeah.
nutrition
Yeah.
and backed everything up in your recovery, maybe do it then. But just before
Yes.
is going to leave you a bit risk of picking up those injuries as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's quite a bit, lots of holiday stories that people do come back with, and they say the other thing is, because you're moving or going to somebody else's house, maybe you're not going abroad, or if you are abroad, you know, the bed, somebody else's
Yes.
bed
Yeah.
is another
It's never
classic.
the
So
same, is it?
never
It's
the
always
same.
it's always too hard, too firm, too hot, too cold.
Yeah.
That's the bit my wife and I always say when, normally about a day before, like, oh, I can't wait to sleep in our own bed again.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you're like, oh man, I'm so boringly middle aged that I'm excited about getting home to sleep in my own bed. But maybe it's just because you get used to it. And the one thing I always worry is quite often, particularly if you're going on a hot holiday, often the villas or the house, whatever, they quite often have stone floors, but like shiny tiles. And
Yeah.
I'm always like, you've had a few drinks, you may be wet from the pool, or like you're wearing flip flops that are slight. And I always kind of think like, if ever I fall over or like bang myself, it's normally kind of like traversing through a house or an apartment that's maybe either wet or I'm wet, and then
Yes.
the floor's not carpet. It's kind of because you're in a hotter country, and yeah, although I definitely see the kids, stacking it a load more. So I can imagine, yeah, like getting injured in other houses is probably quite common.
Yeah. So you like Bambi on ice going,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
do a little
totally.
dance
Yeah,
first
yeah,
and then you go a cropper, don't you?
yeah,
And I'll never forget a dear patient of mine. You know, she fell really badly on exactly that. This was either in Spain or Italy or somewhere with these beautiful marble floors in the
mm,
hotel room. And she slipped and she misplaced because they had a step down into the bathroom, I believe.
yes,
And she stepped down and completely went a cropper and really hurt a hip. And you know, they can really fall and hurt themselves on these types of floors, and you can pick up fractures. And people worry. I get a lot of my friends call me up, or people that know me, and they'll go, Hayley, I'm really worried I've broken something.
mm,
And that's a common concern when you have really badly hurt yourself. But there are like little things you can just double check, because if you're sort of in a lot of pain initially and you've got obviously swelling and bruising, and you might have a little bit of bleeding where some ligaments have torn maybe a little bit, or muscles have torn, and you'll get that bleeding come to the surface of the skin and it looks horrendous, and people go, oh, it's gone this funny color and I'm not quite sure what I've done. But generally, a general rule, if it's lower limb, if you can take a couple of steps, like 2 or 3 steps, and you're fine, and that's not
yes,
agony, then you could
yes.
pretty much be fairly confident that you haven't
Not
broken
broken it. Yeah,
something,
yeah, 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 yeah,
especially
yeah.
a foot or a metatarsal or something like that.
Yes,
But if you're struggling to weight bear, that is a concern for
sign.
us
Yes,
as physios. But if you're slowly getting better, it's not maybe not a speedy recovery, but yeah, you're getting slowly better each time. Whereas if you just, it's been like it for a week and you've been on holiday, you just cannot stand and wait there. That's a little bit of a concern for us.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Well, hopefully, I
yeah.
won't break
So
my hip on holiday. I'll try
if,
not
if
to.
you're,
I'll try not. Yeah, yeah,
no, don't break your hip. That's probably other future decades down the
yeah,
line
yeah,
where
yeah,
we
yeah,
have to
yeah,
worry
yeah,
about
yeah.
that. But saying that, no one really knows. We're going to talk about bone density in another podcast at another
Yes.
time. But that's a silent thing that's happening without us even
Mm,
knowing. So yeah, you don't always have to be necessarily classified as old before these things happen.
yes.
Back pain is prevalent, as you
Yes.
said, Henry, kind of in that kind of 35 to 55-year-old age group, because that's when we were more likely to see disc pathology.
Yes. Yes.
But as you get older, the discs tend to dry out a little bit more.
Okay.
So that's good news from a back
Is it kind of like,
perspective.
but then maybe bone density starts to
Yeah,
decrease. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I think the bone density one is super interesting. I'd love to dive into that maybe another time. Because it's I think diet can definitely there's things that you can do to maybe help improve that or give yourself a fighting chance.
yeah, exactly. So when you're on holiday, Henry, do you find does your family say to you, say if it's like self-catering, do you rustle up anything tasty for breakfast? What would you make
Yeah,
on that
always.
first day?
Well, I think for the thing for me, so we pretty much, if we're staying somewhere, we'll almost always go self-catered just because I like cooking and yeah, that for me it's a joy. Like I don't need an all-inclusive. I'm quite happy cooking. And I think that what I try and do is to if you're going to a country, say you've gone to France or you've gone to Greece, try and cook French food or Greek food. One is that it's going to be more it's nice to kind of embed yourself into the local culture. It's going to make the holiday feel more rewarding. Like you don't, eating pizza in France is fine, but it's like, do that when you're in Italy. But also when it comes to actually shopping, you're going to, often the supermarkets are very different to, the UK ones and they might not have the range, but actually, if you're cooking the local cuisine, you're going to be able to find the ingredients and often they'll be cheaper and, hopefully of a better quality because they're maybe not importing it, so there's so if you're on a Greek island, I'm just thinking, trying to cook a Thai stir fry is probably going to be quite tricky, but actually cooking a nice, making a nice Greek salad or some terraslata or something, or a nice Greek stew is going to be simpler because they're going to be using those ingredients. But often, the kitchen can quite often be quite limited, particularly, whether in an Airbnb, you might just have a basic pan or like a simple oven, you're not going to have a full kitchen at your disposal. So I think it's kind of, for me, I would always try and think about, well, what can I do as like a kind of one pan wonder kind of thing? As much as I want to spend, cook some nice food, I actually, the kids will want to be playing in the pool. I'll be wanting to, read that book that I've been putting off all year. There's other things I want to do and relaxing. I don't want to spend 2 hours cooking. So yeah, so like a kind of a one pan dish is quite a good one. So I don't know, say you're in France for example, you could make a kind of a simple cassoulet or something. So buy some nice beans. They have really good jarred beans. Get some duck or some chicken, and then do it as a kind of a tray bake, get some nice spices in there and make something that you can just pop in the oven and then just forget about it. I'm also, when I'm on holiday, I like obviously like being outside, so I'll always check out to see if there's a barbecue, because quite often, if you're in a villa or somewhere with a bit of an outdoor space, quite often there's an outdoor barbecue, and that's just for me is a nice way to cook your dinner is nice fresh salads, get some nice bread, lots of nice olive oils and stuff, but then buy some meat or some fish or some local sausages that you can then grill up and you get some really nice tasty stuff. And also if you're taking snaps and it's it feels kind of communal, I think it's a nice thing to
Yeah,
do. So you don't need to go crazy, but just try and
and you
try and cook like a local.
that's it. And you mentioned like a one pan where you add beans and chicken and things you said. So
Yeah,
when you do beans, do you like rinse them and things, Henry, or do you pre-cook them or soak them, or do you just whack them in?
probably if I was on holiday, I'd just buy. I would look for a good quality, either whether it's like a jarred one or so. I'm thinking if you're in France and I'm going to make like a cassoulet kind of thing, yeah, I'd buy some decent beans. The flageolet ones are really good. They're like the or the haricot ones.
Yeah.
butter beans or something. Now, I'd always just taste them. Like, and if the outside sauce tastes quite nice, because quite often it's seasoned, then great. If it just tastes like briny water, then maybe I'd give it a rinse. Kind of vibe it as you go, because you might be buying
Right,
a
you
brand
taste
that
it
you've not.
first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
taste it first. Like, it's not going to kill you. It's like, and actually, like, sometimes it's delicious. You're like, yeah, great. That's almost like a stock. And then if you've got a tray that's not too flimsy, you can start by whether it's heating up your lardons, getting a bit of fat out, and then your onions and your garlic, get them cooking down a bit. Then you can add your chicken and your beans and or your sausage or your duck or whatever you've got, and any other little veggies you want to add into it. And then if there's some foil, you can put some on, or just a a cup of water, and then just stick it in the oven, and that can just tick over for you know an hour to 2 hours, and just slowly bubble, and all the flavors kind of melt together. And I'd probably, like, if you're doing something, I'd probably make enough, if there's a fridge, make enough for 2 days, because then it might be the next day you're doing a trip or something, and you're going to be out, and you don't want to be rushing back of like, oh, it's going to be 6 o'clock, the kids are going to be starving, and now I've got to cook dinner, and
Yeah.
and actually I really just want to have 2 or 3 glasses of rosé and not worry about it. So you can kind of be a bit, and
Yeah.
also it'll taste nicer the next day.
Yeah. And do your kids eat the beans? Are they good at eating
Yeah, I
all the
think
healthy beans? Do they
Yeah, I
go,
think so. They go
yeah,
in phases. They go in phases. They definitely, yeah, they'll eat bits of it. They're pretty good. They're pretty good. But we have good days and bad days. I mean, they would love it if we just did burgers and pizza every day. That would be absolutely fine with that. But also, but then like, try and get them involved with it as well. Kind of, they can. I mean, they're not probably going to cook all of it, but they can. I don't know, turn a
yeah, I
sausage on
think
the
you're right.
barbecue,
I think
or
they have to be
help you do the shopping.
exposed
Just
to it.
yeah, yeah, totally. And I think for me, it's about normalizing it. So, like, food shouldn't be this kind of, I don't know, like, it should just be like part of life. And like, I'm really, so we're going on holiday this summer, and we're going to Greece, which I haven't been to for 10 years. So I'm very excited. Probably going to be a bit bored of Greek salad by the end of it, but actually, I'm just really looking forward to, like, beautiful tomatoes, lovely, like, we'll definitely buy a whole watermelon, and my daughter will probably, like, you don't see the watermelons in the supermarket and they're like rubbish. These ones are like, they're like
Proper.
10 kilos or so. And it'll
Like a
probably
pumpkin.
be, I don't know, under 10 euros. So it's a good value bit of fruit, and she'll probably eat that for breakfast and lunch, and then possibly dinner if she can. And it's just delicious, super hydrating, really, really
Yes.
flavorful. Best eaten at the beach. Then you can just, like, wash yourself off in the sea afterwards, because they're quite
Yeah.
juicy and messy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
I
for me,
love,
that's yeah. Whereas, like, my grandparents used to go on holiday, and they used to take food with them because they didn't trust the local cuisine. So they used to pack, like a Battenberg and some fruitcake, and take their own tea bags just in case the local food wasn't quite right. And
yeah.
maybe that was a bygone generational thing. Whereas for us, or for me particular, going to a new country, obviously you've got to get through the journey and not end up with a really bad back.
Yep.
Don't fall over and break your hip. But if you've got through that, then actually it's about you know find the local cuisine, and most places got the internet, so you can just Google, like, local recipe. What do they eat in Croatia? I don't know. Like, find out,
Yeah.
and then be like, great, well, let's have a go at making that. Don't. um I think,
Yeah, I've never
a
thought to
holiday
do
should
that.
be
How have I
yeah.
never thought to Google the recipe for the planet, like for the country that you're
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
in?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas you kind of, yeah, you might go, oh, I fancy that, or I fancy a salad, and yeah. So have you got any good dips to create for, especially the Greek salads, because they're lovely, aren't they, with the feta
Yes,
cheese, and they're really good. I mean, they're so healthy. The
yes,
Mediterranean diet is
yes, yes.
fantastic for your health. So
I
do you make
I mean
nice little
I mean
dips?
tzatziki is the easiest, because obviously it's just, cucumbers, yogurt that you can have for breakfast, and then also you can make it into a nice dip. Obviously plenty of garlic, bit of olive oil, and some mint. That's a really easy one. Probably something like tiramisu, which is the other famous one, which is smoked cod's roe, is maybe a bit ambitious for an Airbnb. But if you find yourself in a very fancy kitchen that's got a blender, and you can find some smoked cod's roe, then tiramisu is one of the best dips. But probably you'll probably be able to buy it pre-made. But then often the pre-made ones, if you then check the ingredients, they're often not made with olive oil. They'll be made with vegetable oil. They'll have loads of preservatives in to stop them going off. And so, um, Yeah, it is the kicker, isn't it? It's the
Yeah. So how do you make that second dip that you mentioned?
termislata. So it's smoked cod's roe. So it's kind of like this dried. It's the eggs essentially, and then they're cured and dried and smoked, and then you peel off this kind of membrane, and inside it's almost like tiny caviar, and it's got this kind of slightly orangey pinky look to it. And then you put it into a blender with like a firm bread, like say sourdough or like a country bread that's stale, and then soaked in water, like a salty water, and then you rinse it out, squeeze out, and you put that in the blender, and then you put like garlic, salt, lots of lemon juice, and then you blend it and you emulsify it with olive oil. And so you're basically making like a mayonnaise that's thickened with, well, it's thickened with the olive oil, but it's kind of the emulsifier rather than egg yolks. It's the smoked cotterelle and the breadcrumbs. And then you can put raw onion in, and you can flex on it and add whatever you like. But that in itself is the kind of the basic recipe. But it's very hard to make a very small quantity. So, if you made it, you'd probably make like a kilo, and then you're like, oh, that's a lot of dip. So I probably won't make it on this Greek holiday I'm going on,
No,
because
no, just make the other one.
I don't think I'll be a blender at the Airbnb. Tzatziki is definitely achievable, so we'll make some of that. Or like tapenade is another great one. Local
I'm
olives.
surprised you haven't got your own little travel kit of
Travel, yeah, yeah,
little
yeah,
things.
yeah. So if I actually a travel hack, if I'm in the UK, so we went to Wales a few weeks ago, and we were in an Airbnb that was very nice. But I took my knives and a few kitchen implements, because for me, if you've got like a blunt knife, and it's just it's too frustrating. Whereas I know I've got some nice chef knives at home that I can take with me. It's probably the way that you probably travel with your, I don't know, your yoga mat and
Water bottle.
I don't know, like one of those rollerbally things. It's tools of the trade.
Yeah.
Yeah, but obviously it's a little different putting chef knives on a Ryanair flight.
I was going to say, I was a bit concerned about you being
Yeah, yeah,
pulled
yeah.
over by.
So I won't take them to Greece. I'll just have to suffer, but it's fine.
Just use the very blunt one in the hotel
Yes.
room or in
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
Airbnb.
Yes.
Well,
Frustrating,
that's
but hey,
slightly warm.
yeah, yeah. You just have to embrace it. I think in lower your expectations of what you can do, but just I think again, it's just that try and buy local ingredients that look great, that the locals are eating, because they're going to be in season. They're going to be cheaper, and also it's good to embrace other people's culture when they come.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. I think that's inspired everybody to give it a go. It's definitely inspired me to look up those recipes now, just like actually thinking of just associating it with the country.
Yes,
So well, hopefully everyone might give that a go, and they might think about setting up their car before they travel. You
definitely.
never
Well,
know, Henry.
I'm going to do that. I love that little elbow trick. That is a great little hack. I'm definitely going to try that
Great
one
little
out.
hack. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, well, I'll see you next time on the next
Yeah,
podcast then, Henry.
brilliant. Thank you, Hayley.